All right. Good
And
evening, everyone. I call this meeting to order at 7:03 p.m. This is Thursday, January 18th, 2024. All right, so I'm going to do the roll call. This is our first meeting, by the way, of the new year. So we are blessed and honored to be here to serve you all. I'm going to do a roll call right quick. Is Member Leahy present?
present.
Awesome. Is Member Yasik present? Debbie
Yes,
Yasik?
here.
Great. Okay. We don't have any comments submitted this evening, but so we're just going to move forward now. The approval of the minutes, though it's on the agenda, I think we're just going to move past that for now, if that's okay with everyone. Um, when we get those finalized, we will then go over that at our next meeting. So thank you, Madam Clerk. We're going to go to discussions. This is the update on the task force to study. Oh, yes, please, Eileen.
We did have minutes for, did we also, do we have minutes for November? Or we haven't gotten those yet either, I guess.
Yeah, it looks like it's the minutes from.
No, the minutes from November, you guys need to vote, approve them as amended once I change them with the amendment you made in December.
Okay, so we'll get those in February also.
Yes, you're going to get them probably by the end of the week. I just didn't have it ready today.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if it was both.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so thank you. The discussion is the update on the task force to study the city municipal elections. Final report. We're here, Debbie.
Yay. I know, yay.
Okay. So first off, thank you so much, Eileen, for being a part of this process and for leading us to this final report. I did take time to look it over some, and I know there's much more reading to do, though we could talk about this. I know that one of the conversations in the beginning was not necessarily that this report would take effect, all of its findings would take effect in the 2025 election, and some would be preparation for the future, but still, please, Eileen, if you can kind of give us the summary and wrap it up for us here, and the marvelous work, or appreciative work, I should say, of the task force as well, who took the time to do this.
Right. Well, I mean, there are 11 recommendations. We can go through them. I mean, some of them are somewhat mutually exclusive. So I think the expectation would be that we start looking at them and then deciding what our opinions are on each one, and to do the research and give feedback so that when there is an opportunity to address the city council, to give them our recommendations as far as what we see happening, maybe if there's priority lists, and let them also know things that we may be starting on. So, for instance, the first one is adopt state law by reference. Is that something that we would agree with, question, deny, or some of this information?
Oh, yeah, I would say that there was a lot that we agreed on, and this was one of those parts. Is our code should resemble the state.
We're not talking about resembling. We're talking about basically adopting state code, and of course you would have to modify it for municipal, but it's not so much changing the code, in my understanding, but adopting their code and then amending it.
So couldn't we just update our code to include pieces of it? And that's what I'm looking at it from that standpoint. That's why I said what I said about it. But I know their findings, a large amount was to kind of shift in partnership with the state. I know that was recommended to kind of align our elections with on those even years, though. I would say that this is a further conversation. Debbie, please chime in. For me, I think that we should update our code to resemble much of what the state code says, to still give us the ability to keep the core of our code without it taking away from our individuality as a city.
Yeah, I agree. We need to stay, keep our independence and keep what makes us unique while being visionary, while being smart about the cost and the abilities
Well, what core pieces would you all like to see that we think were different and better?
Right.
Well, we talked about campaign finance. We talked about the fees or filing when you're doing your campaign finance reports. Those are two pieces.
Right. Most of the things that we've been looking at in terms of research is looking at that. I mean, I'm open to either way, but I think we have to have a good, either we adopt it or we have a good reason for why we're just going to update it. Because, you know, I can't imagine there's too much in our code considering how antiquated it is. Now, granted, there's things maybe we don't want to include. You know, it's a question, do we take our current code and try to align it with the state code, or do we take the state code and, you know, make it the city code? I see.
Yeah, Ashley came
He
on.
actually
Maybe
popping
you'll
in if he has an
share
opinion on it.
if you will. I will say too, though, Eileen, I think, and Debbie, I think that when we talk about adopting the state code, there should just be, I know there was an alignment conversation where we look at what parts of our code should be updated and add that to our code. I know that was a part of the conversation previously, though, Ashley, please.
Sorry. I mean, it's a hard lift either way. On the one hand, the easiest thing is to just adopt the state code, but then you are left with pieces that don't necessarily fit. But as the code is right now, one, it is antiquated. There's a lot of stuff in there that talks about like writing things down with like pen on paper. Okay, so you have a lot of antiquated, and the other problem with it is the reality that when we have the county run our elections, they can't always accommodate all of our weird quirks. So they're going to default to what the state laws are anyway, to run our election. And so, I mean, Elaine and I have been working on this to try and do legislative updates to sort of fill the gaps. I don't know if it's easier one way or another to do the state and take out what we don't want, or try and shove state stuff into ours.
Well, another advantage is when the state updates it, it automatically would update for us.
Yeah.
So,
though that would then require us to be tied to everything the state does, and that's not what I think the voters would necessarily ask for. I think the voters too would like to see that we stand by some pieces, at least, or at least I know for myself, when I think about our code in the city and the state's code, we can take out those pieces that are antiquated, and we can look at the state code and find where they would add to our code.
So again, my question is, what is it about our code that makes it unique and make it better than state code?
Yeah,
oh, right, Ashley.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure there's much in our code that is unique and good. And now I'm not going to say that with 100% surety, and I haven't been doing this as long as Elaine, but I've been running the election since 2013. And frankly, more often than not, our code causes me legal headaches versus having any sort of help.
I think about the only thing our code has that the state that's unique is we have emergency judges, which is not something that when we work with the county, they're always happy about. So
yeah, I was going to say that's always a fight.
Yeah, so the emergency judges are stationed at City Hall. And so if is in the hospital or someone can't get out or for whatever reason, the emergency judges will go to that person with a ballot. And that's about, there might be other little things, but that's about the only thing I think of that's specifically unique. There are other things that are missing or vague or antiquated. So, I mean, Cynthia Brewer has started looking at revising some of the code, and it can be a little overwhelming, to be honest with you. And I do worry that if we try to adapt state code to city code, we're going to miss things.
Like definitions. The problem is, like, when you try to cut and paste things, you don't always pull like all the definitions and all the cross references. And so like, because like the state code is going to reference different sections within itself. And so if you don't make sure that you catch all those cross references, if you don't make sure you include all the definitions that they use, then you sort of put a circle into a square or kind of scenario. So they have these gaps.
You know, I think maybe looking a little closer to see what the task force felt in terms of what where they came from in terms of their decision.
Well, they said adapting state law by reference is the most efficient way to keep current.
It is, because then you get the automatic updates and everything. And I mean, and here's the reality is, because we don't in theory run our own elections, that by default, we're already sort of being pushed into using a lot of state laws anyway, because just of the nature of the relationship. And we don't have, at this point, we don't have the capability to run our own election. I was here the last time we ran our own election, and it took us 4 or 5 days to do the whole thing, like 24 hours around the clock. Like I was sitting in the polling center until 3 or 4 a.m. Yeah, I mean, so, and that's the last time I did it. And we managed it, but I have to say it was probably the most irritating and strenuous election that I've dealt with. The ones with the county are infinitely smoother for both the voters and for us. So I'd almost, if I had to pick, I'd probably want to look at all the state law and see if there was anything in there that I couldn't live with. And then we could reference it into our code and say, except for the city does not adopt X, Y, and Z sections. Or if we want an extra, like if we want emergency judges, you could add in another section that says, and the city also requires emergency judges. Although the county board does fight us on that every time.
Right.
So I know one of the conversations too was the timing, and it would be quicker, you know, better for us to just adopt the state code and then go back to do it. Shouldn't we analyze, not just us, because, you know, we can share, but shouldn't there be an analyzation behind comparing our city code and our state code?
We've had two task force, and at least 5 or 6 of you guys do that.
Right. That's what they did.
But
That's what the task force did.
Yeah, I mean, my office has done it multiple times. This board has done it multiple times. 2 task force since I've been here have done it. So it's not like it hasn't been looked at. And that's not even including like the charter revision groups.
So is there parts, because it's not as if this is a very detailed, you know, report where they're breaking down reasons for everything. So when you look at that part there, it doesn't necessarily give us why, based off of what parts of our city code are lacking and what parts of the state code has strength. You know, it's not comparing it more than it's saying for the ease or just for keeping it up to date.
Well, they might have discussed it in their meetings. I didn't go to all their meetings.
I listened to the meetings, but they didn't dive in.
I mean, but I will tell you right now, I have dived in because the county makes us to do a compare and contrast every time we do an MOU for the election. So I have dived in, and I have had to pull out, and Elaine has done it too, pull out the discrepancies. And frankly, most of the discrepancies are antiquated things that we shouldn't be doing anyway.
Right. Debbie, you and Keanu have both gotten the, I believe it's addendum C, which you've gotten in the past, which outlines a lot of the differences. I would propose that take a little time to go through it if you want to sit down and do a side-by-side of the city code and the state code. And there's certainly areas that, you know, contribution limits and certain things that won't necessarily apply or would need to be amended. But I think before we start making some further discussion, we need to make sure that we understand what we're looking at.
Exactly. I agree completely. But, and Ashley, thank you for all the work that you've done to even provide us with this, because if this is going to make it easier for us to have a fair, you know, and inclusive elections, we got to do it. Though I think as we move in that direction, especially as it comes to major shifts and changes to our elections. I would like to see us. I agree that we should take a little more time on that.
Yeah, I want you guys to all be comfortable with it. But that being said, and I've been here with the city for 10 years. In 10 years, people have done deep dives on it. So it's not like an arbitrary conversation.
Right.
Sure.
And another big thing to consider is the use of technology. I mean, unless we adopt code, the state code, it may make it more difficult for us to access technology. So for instance, the initial redo of city code included online ballots to be able to download like you can do in a state. And we can't do that. And if we're not running with the state, chances are that we wouldn't be able to access that. So it's not just the words on the paper, it's the use of the code also, and how it's used and how it integrates with the county that's going to hopefully continue running our elections. So anything else we could pick that up at the next meeting?
Yes. So pretty much too, that would, if we had, let's say we did just adopt state code, we're specifically talking about the election here, election code. And when we look at that, let's say that the state would allow for a certain type of election, like a nonpartisan election, or let's say, so anything that the code says would just be applied automatically to everything within our city. And then the county would ensure that it gets done with the further partnership. And so that's what we're saying here?
Well, it depends on what you want to do different. I mean, it's a good point in terms of nonpartisan. Currently, the state does not do nonpartisan elections. There are things like open primaries. So as we go through this list, that's what I meant, that some of these things can be mutually exclusive. It doesn't mean they can't be done. They're not. We might need to get legislation passed at the state level for some of those sorts of things. And again, we don't need to be making final decisions tonight, but in terms of just, okay, they've made that suggestion, we adopt state law. So I think it behooves all of us to sit down and really look at what we're talking about. And then, and also in light of the other recommendations that are coming after this, to get a sense of what this group wants to move, would recommend or move forward with.
Okay. I love it.
Okay, so
yeah. And just, the legal things are, a specialty of those who are in it. So, we have a law office, and Ashley, like she said, this has gone on for years in various forms. And you too, Eileen, you've had years with this. People have done deep dives, the CRC, the task forces. So, for me, it's not my strong suit. Law, all the legal parts, and necessarily coming up with the verbiage or who can or who can't do certain things. I would defer to those who have expertise in this area, and would rather be asked, do you want this? Do you want this? Have Ashley, like you've thrown out some scenarios, and I of course want the most efficient time, money, staff, and fairness to the electorate that we can do. But hooking up with the county, which hooks with the state, and all the references is something we're gonna, we've bought into already, and going. I mean, so many people have looked at this for over so many years. Are we saying that nobody's come up with the best idea yet? Is that where we are? Is that why we're stuck on this? On updating? It seems like we're stuck.
Well, I don't think we're stuck. I mean, we've talked about it, but it's having the ability to move forward. And at least in the last Board of Supervisors of elections, the feeling was we need a task force. We'd like to have people outside of this group. So again, I'm putting forth, to you and Keanu, that, you need to be comfortable with it also. So you don't need a legal background to sit down and look at the two and just compare the two. We're
Yeah.
not going to be writing the legislation, but you can go through the code and just say, this makes sense. This makes sense. I think this needs update. We've started doing some of that, but if you go through all of that and you still feel like, oh, there's enough here that we need to be updating as opposed to adopting, then you'll have that information to say maybe to the city council. I mean, we have to be able to, when we talk with the city council, to have information to back up what our position is.
Exactly. I get it.
So, and Cynthia, has, like I said, she started putting it together and it just I found it overwhelming.
I mean, I've peeked, I've looked at addendum C, and I've looked at this too, and it's, it gets, you get into the weeds and it's just,
right. And we may find that going the other way doesn't work as well, but you have to sit down and really look and see what, and this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. I mean, we're going to get parts of it. We need to get certain things done before the 2025 election, but an overhaul of the code, we're syncing in with the state law, is not going to occur prior to 2025.
And anything that needs state law changes, the legislature, we should get that to them, next month, because they're done early April.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We won't get anything done for 2025 because we have to get it through the city council first. So it's not on for the state legislature this year.
Okay, got it.
But we might have a better idea of what would need
in 2025.
What would need legislation. So So okay to move on to number 2.
Sure. Yes.
So I'm not quite sure, I'll be honest with you, where this came from. The should determine whether Annapolis should maintain lower campaign contribution limits. I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure.
I know that we talked about with the state code, the contribution limits being higher, and we discussed whether or not we would change those limits.
Right, but the way this reads, it wasn't really clear.
Yeah, it didn't give much.
I mean, if we adopt state code, we would lower the state level of campaign contributions to meet what we currently have. But to me, the way this reads is it's saying that the $1,000 for alderman and the $2,500 for mayor should be lowered. Or am I just missing a comma or something?
No, it says it should maintain the contribution limits that it has currently, because remember,
so I'm reading it incorrectly. Okay.
So it would then, in adopting, as you just mentioned, though, that point was that in adopting the code, it would just be shifted to maintain it at
That's how I read it.
I would be curious to see if any of the aldermen would have some feelings about that or input.
Yeah, I do, because that is, I think, a conversation that we've even had, and the question is, why not raise it? And is that because of special interests? Is that because of the campaign capacity? What's the issue with raising it to a state standard of $6,000?
That's pretty high.
Yeah, that's high.
I'm just what is is it because we feel that if it's high, then a person who doesn't have it won't give it? And if a person does give it to someone, and that person seems to be influential to that policy or what have you, or the policy making, then the voter would decide whether to trust it. And so that's why I'm just wondering, what is the contribution limit question? Why not?
Well, the why not is because people will buy elections.
Yeah, we're so small.
They're doing that currently.
Right.
They're doing that currently.
Maybe at larger levels, but the footprint of Annapolis is so small. I mean, an alderman has, a couple thousand people. The city has, 28,000 voters. So it's, you have to look at the difference in the footprint that a candidate has to reach. And yeah, you need more money to reach more people, but we have a few people.
Debbie, the reach now is national, okay? It's not about just the city of Annapolis. When the candidate has Act Blue, they are getting
Oh,
national contributions. They are getting contributions from PACs. So that's the reality of
okay.
elections now. I think though that we can look at this more when we get down to number 6 in terms of public campaign finance.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because I think that's where we can really emphasize the need for the public input and to keep elections fair, and making sure that people have access to running and things of that nature, or getting the support. Um,
So
for you.
can we move on number 3?
Yes, let's go on. Yep.
Right, transition from a party nominating primary system to a blanket primary system.
Lord have mercy. This so right.
There's different ways of doing the blanket primary, and actually I meant to double check because I think there's one term that was actually ruled unconstitutional.
Ooh, let's look it up.
So what was discussed in the task force was not necessarily a nonpartisan election, but doing an election where it's open. So if you have 4 candidates, you just list the 4 candidates on one ballot. You don't make them Republican or Democrat. So it would be like, you could do it something like top 2, move on to the general. So, and then you can also look at whether you want to put party affiliations after their names or not. So it could go both ways. I know that there's a lot of asking about nonpartisan elections. People talk about ranked choice. The reality is currently we don't have a lot of competitive races. So
Right.
I'm not sure that, I myself am in favor of doing an open primary, which would allow, have one ballot, list all the candidates, and would allow all registered voters, including unaffiliated, to vote. That's my personal opinion.
So I know with open primaries, it's really that the party themselves are having the primaries, and the unaffiliated, what have you, can vote in their primaries, which would take the partnership with the parties, I know, in certain aspects, to even agree to that.
There's different, an open primary usually means everybody votes and there's one ballot.
Okay, so the form you're speaking of is just that specific piece. Okay,
That's one way of doing it. There's other ways. So you would keep it it's not really an open primary.
Yeah.
You can have it so that there's a Democrat, you can go by party, so a Democrat slate and a Republican slate, and unaffiliated, actually anybody can choose which one they want.
Anybody. Mhm.
That gets a little bit more complicated. And so when we get into this type of scenario, that's really something to talk with, say, Dave Garris, to get a little bit better sense in terms of what could be done.
Now, with that, I think I know we talked about the being able to count these ballots, but maybe if we get more support from the county and our state on this, if we do something like this, I think we also should incorporate pieces such as ranked choice voting. I don't think that it should be alone in that.
Well, ranked choice voting. Well, why would you want I'm just wondering what your reasons for ranked choice voting.
So for ranked choice voting, it's also
you have 2 candidates and you want ranked. I'm just saying, if you have 2 candidates, how would ranked choice voting work?
Well, if you have 3 and there's an election and you have 3 candidates, me as the voter can go and select in order which ones I would prefer. Now, if no one candidate reaches the majority threshold, then the second choices would then be in effect on that second round of ballot counting. And depending on what that tally is, if the second round doesn't show any sort of breaking of the majority threshold, then the third choice would then be enacted. Now, this would depend on if there are more than 2 candidates in a race. Now, if there's just 2 candidates in a race, that's a little bit different. Though when it comes to multiple candidates in a race and opening up a process where now unaffiliated voters can vote, I think that would then even give more support to those outside of the 2-party system.
Well, ranked choice voting does not necessarily include unaffiliated voters.
But it can if we do an open.
Can,
That's
but
what
it
I'm saying.
doesn't,
If we go,
it,
that's why I'm saying if we do the open primary in the way that the fashion that you're mentioning, which is technically the blanket primary, then we should also incorporate the ranked choice voting. And if we do have question on that, maybe invite someone or some people or have some type of deeper dive too into how that can help with the inclusivity of the elections.
right. And I'll have to look at the report again, but the task force did look at it, and I think they kind of backed away from ranked choice
Yep.
again because
Yeah,
They did.
historically, we do not have a large number of people running. Now that could change, especially if we go with something that's an open primary that doesn't list the parties, and maybe some people feel that they can, some people feel that because of the Hatch Act, we don't have some people that are running that could be running. Ranked choice voting, I don't believe would necessarily change that because you can rank choice for an open primary and also for a closed primary. If I recall correctly, because the state does not do ranked choice voting, it would be very difficult for us to be doing it. If I recall, Dave Garris says that the software, they have the software, but they don't use the software. And my understanding too is that the software to buy on our own would be extremely expensive. So again, I'm always a little hesitant when people ask about ranked choice because I sometimes worry that people are looking at it as the fix to something that isn't broken yet. That's just, again, my hesitancy.
Just a piece. I think it's a part of it because elections have a lot of pieces that need to be reformed, and and so we should constantly look at ways to make that so. And I
But
think
there's other ways of doing nonpartisan. So again, you have to kind of look at, do you want nonpartisan or partisan? Because there's there's an approval method for doing nonpartisan. Ranked choice is kind of the sexy one, the one that everybody's talking about now. But I mean, again, we have to have good reasons for making recommendations for why we would go there. I'm just not convinced that the city of Annapolis, based on its size and its history of candidates, that ranked choice is going to add anything except an expense to our elections.
Yeah, right now, I certainly agree with Eileen. Ranked choice voting, I've been reading about it, I've been looking at it, and it is something we should continue to keep on the menu going forward. But currently it wouldn't fit into our current structure. I mean, we're so small, we have so few candidates, and we're not even, we don't even have a blanket or open or nonpartisan election yet. And it is going to be very confusing to voters, so we would definitely have to educate and outreach. And also, I'm not thrilled about, the possibility that a third or fourth tier candidate could win. I mean, there's nuances that have happened in ranked choice voting that cause concern where you do have strong candidates, but maybe a couple percentage points off. You might have two strong candidates, but neither one get a majority. And then, somebody pulls out, and, like the third person might pull out, and then the fourth person wins. That really wasn't anybody's first choice. They might be the person's third or fourth choice, but I don't know. I just
with ranked choice voting, you also set up. It's not just that. There's also top two, top three. So if you're saying top two in a ranked choice, you're saying the top two people that get the highest votes, closest to that threshold, will move on in the next round. And so then we would look at the choices that were on the ballot. So, or if it's 3-4 people. Now, if we're making an open primary or a blanket primary, there are more candidates on the ballot anyways. So if you're saying that there are going to be now Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated, or Green Party, or what have you, Libertarian, coming and running in an election locally, right then and there, we already have the fit for having ranked choice. Now, some people can just decide not to do the ranked choice. Some people can say, okay, I'm just going to choose my one favorite candidate. So it's not a requirement for the voter. And also that would also be a choice on the person that is running, whether or not they would want to participate in a process like this. I mean, this isn't something that is going to close and whatnot. It's really a way to bring more options in.
Well, if I'm running for an office, how do I choose not? And
I'm not going to want to. If I know that
it's a
the
ranked
elections
choice
are,
election, how do I choose not to participate?
no, you make the decision to whether or not you want to run in a new election system within the city that allows for now ranked choice voting and or a blanket primary or open primary. I mean, that's the decisions that people make when they run. There's many parts to that, and so I was just looking at both the voter side as well as the candidate side,
And
or the people
so if
involved.
we propose the city moves in that direction, then that also presupposes that perhaps we'd have to check with the county if
Sure.
I don't believe the county would run it for us, but I don't know that for certain. And there would also be the expense. We would have to get the software or be able to access the software that they have. So,
Okay.
so
Sure.
those are
So
just things
maybe
that
that's more information too that we can gather for that.
well, I
Though
believe
I
Dave
do
Harris-
agree, though, to the focus of nonpartisan and partisan. Maybe we can just focus on there. What do we as a board agree on? Do we agree that it should remain partisan, or do we agree that there should be some type of method to lead us to that nonpartisanship, or removing the two-party system as the stature of all politics?
Okay, well, there's a couple of different questions in there. One is partisan versus nonpartisan. And then if you're looking at nonpartisan, what type of nonpartisan? And then if you're looking at partisan, you can still utilize ranked choice, even if it's a partisan.
Right.
But again, the reality is that elections are run by the parties. So, that's just something that's just a given. So I think if we look back at what Dave Garris said, maybe just to confirm that I think at that point, doesn't mean it couldn't be done in the future, but I think if we were to move forward with something like ranked choice, we need to look at the big picture and make sure that it's a good fit for city of Annapolis. Or can we attain the same goals that we want in a different manner? So if we want to increase access, particularly to unaffiliated voters, does it have to be through a ranked choice system, or can it be in another system? And again, looking at other systems like approval and other nonpartisan options. So
yeah, you just highlight something. Who does it benefit the most? What is the benefit? We're looking at all for the voters primarily, and I think with ranked choice and even with a nonpartisan partisan, we should always look at what benefits the voters the most. And I think that when you're looking at nonpartisan elections, you are allowing or opening up a process where now a third party or what have you, unaffiliated, can have more backing to now jump into this race.
Right, so
where
that
now it's equal or equitable for them.
So that benefits the candidate.
Yep. And so that is, though me as a, not me, but speaking generally, me as a
Are you winning?
no, me as an unaffiliated voter, I was gonna say, me as an unaffiliated voter, I'm sick and tired of the two-party system. I want to have a candidate who I can have to vote for, or I want to be that person to jump up and do that. And now that it's open for me.
Well, it is open. It's open. It's open right now. An unaffiliated.
It's not equitable for a third party.
It's not necessarily equitable, but it's $60 and 100 signatures. So it's not.
That's another barrier for them. That's 100 signatures.
I'm not disputing that there's a barrier. I'm disputing. I don't think it's an unattainable. But anyway, can we move on to number 4?
Yes, let's go.
Which is when adopting the new system, consider whether a candidate's party affiliation can be listed. And I think we've already kind of discussed some of that. Number 5 is move to the statewide cycle so that the state and county boards could manage more of the election process.
Okay.
Now back to 4 for a minute. They were recommending, 3-2 vote to put the R or the D or the I or the U next to the name, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So this is and like I would not want it next to the name. And there's goods and bads to both. But are we as a group when we're moving on from this, are we saying we're part of the 3, part of the 2, or just accepting their split decision?
I don't think we've decided on any parts of this report
Yeah,
tonight.
yeah.
It's really discussion.
Okay.
Though, if
All
you
right.
would like to, though, I can tell you one thing: I am in favor of it being listed.
You're the 3 and I'm the 2.
No, we're all together, but yeah,
Okay,
I
all
would.
right, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we can
no.
move on as long as,
So
yeah.
wait a minute. So Kiana, you're saying you want it listed.
I think it should be included in
So
it
then
because
it is a partisan election.
now
To me
how is
it
that
is.
partisan? Now is partisan election is the division of our parties. Having a blanket primary is allowing for all the parties or people that are running for office to be on
Okay.
one ballot. Therefore, it's yes, it's partisan in the way of defining your party, but it's not partisan in the way of splitting up
Voting.
Well, because it's
and
you're
voting.
talking
Yes,
about two different things. So I just want to make that clear. One is how you run the election and one is how you write the ballot.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we should talk about running the election specifically if we do a nonpartisan, but not when we talk about the writing of the ballot. The writing of the ballot should include the party on it. Now, Debbie, I do understand that in not including it, it gives more to the this everyone being on the same, just it's me and my name. It's not, it's the party
Yeah.
isn't
It
shifting
makes
people's
the
minds.
candidates have to reach out to everybody. It puts more responsibility on the voter and the candidate. The voter needs to know, what's important to them and who the candidates are, and the candidate needs to reach out to everybody. It's truly one Annapolis. There's people on the ballot. They're just like your neighbor. They're just like you and me. There's no stigma next to them. It is their name on the ballot. It's up to the voter and it's up to the candidate to make sure the education is out there as to what issues they're promoting. And then you vote for whoever matches up with you. And being one Annapolis, being a small city, we have issues, like somebody might have sidewalks as their issue. Somebody else might have development. Somebody else might have parking. It's not the death penalty, and it's not abortion, and it's not, huge federal or even state issues. So I really would like us to be one Annapolis and not have, these divisions or monikers, and also to have more people run than having nobody or one person or 2 people.
Okay. So do you think that this is a very fruitful so do you think that having the party on there, or what do you think? Let me ask, what do you think when it comes to having the party on there and it being us not giving the voter as much information about a candidate as possible? How do you feel about that when it comes to not including the party on there? And when it comes to including the party on there, how do you feel about, well, let's start there first, because now you make it. So how do you feel that, or what do you feel about people not having that on there so they won't have all the information about that candidate? How do you feel about
Well,
them
when
thinking,
somebody
oh,
goes to
I'm gonna vote because
vote,
they're Democrat, or I'm gonna vote because they're Republican? You're thinking that that's what?
Right. When somebody goes to vote, if they're going to vote, they know they know who they're going to vote for. They know what's important to them. They know what's going to vote for. So, before that person goes to vote, they look up or meet or talk to family or friends. Who you're going to vote for? Who do you like? Oh, I want to vote, but I'm not sure about this. It happens a lot with ballot questions, right? Where there's no R or D on a ballot question. So people are talking. People who are going to go vote are finding stuff out. So it just means that they, when we don't have a D or an R or a U or an I or a G, people need to to find out, and the candidates need to make sure the people know about them so that a voter can be informed and make the best match for them.
Eileen, what do you think about this too? Like, what are your thoughts? And
I'm
I
pretty
know that you were
neutral.
a part of the, yeah, because
I think, Debbie, your view of how people vote is very idealistic, and I would like to keep with that, but I think that for many voters, they are used to party and partisan, and so they may just say, no, well, I'm gonna vote for the person with an R after their name. Now, that may change. You would hope that when they get their sample ballot, that might make a difference. I don't have real strong opinions. I'm more of would like to see unaffiliated included in the primaries. That's where
absolutely.
Yeah,
However-
but you know, if there is a D or an R, so I think we want open, blanket, nonpartisan, or let's say open or blanket primaries. If we allow everybody to vote for anyone, which is what we want and what the task force is recommending, I think, then if there is that D or R next to their name, and we're in a city where Democrats outnumber anyone else, then wouldn't the Democrats always win?
There we go. And that's where I was getting to. That's where I was really waiting for that conversation, because when you think about the D or the R, do we ask then the candidate who's running, would you like for your representation or the party that you are a part of and represents, a lot of your ideology and things of that nature, would you like that to be on your name? Or do you ask the parties, hey, are you all comfortable with your candidates who you are going to, this is the party that, this is my candidate, if you're taken on by that party, if you're comfortable with having it on the ballot. I think too that those questions could be asked at the point in time that this arises, or maybe it's just the option is there for whomever is running. Whereas if you are an R and you feel like, oh, I'm gonna be treated, like, oh, it's all these Dems in here and I may not win, and you feel that just having your name and going out there and talking, you have that ability to do so. But if you're a Democrat and you stand by the Democrats and you're, I don't mind it, then I'll have a D next to my name on the ballot. Could we look at it in that way, or are we saying that it has to be one way or the other?
Well, I would like to keep our city election different from especially the federal or even the state. I would like to keep our issues local, and our issues are smaller. And there's a lot of people who are very effective, who could be very effective. So I think most people, or many Americans, are socially liberal and financially conservative, right? We've heard that, right? That you've got your fringes of both sides. You've got people who don't care or know about anything. But if most people are moderate, the majority of Americans are moderate. So say they're socially liberal, financially conservative, that's not represented anymore really with the D and the R, especially at the federal level, right? And even the state level. A lot of both parties have been taken over, by their progressive factions, called different, progressive to you and like weird to me, kooky or worse names for our side. But I really, this is a time where we do need to improve our elections. We need more candidates to run, and we need more people to vote. And we could run much more efficiently if people just focused on getting our issues solved and not having to have I don't want the parties actually involved. I don't want the big parties in our territory. Let them look at the state and the federal. But local, city, county, I think a lot of our problems are because we're not concentrating on what's important that we can control.
Yeah, Debbie, that part right there, it actually does emphasize how not having that party next to the name isn't confusing people or still giving to the narrative that parties are the center of elections. That right there, I think, emphasize that. And so let's come back to this and maybe even ask, those people or parties that the Democrats, Republicans, Central Committees, or what have you. Let's hear what they have, not necessarily to put that into full account, but maybe have that conversation, because that part right there, I think, would get me a little bit closer to, and maybe even, hearing from voters and our constituent, what have you, get me a little closer to it being that way without the parties being on there. Because now we're saying, no, it's you, and if people know you're a Democrat, you vote for that Democrat. If I don't know who this person is, I got to look them up. The party didn't come out, and maybe the party does still support you. Maybe you are still a part of a party, and that party is just behind the scenes doing the groundwork and organizing, but it's not the staple of our elections. And so, oh yeah, we have a Democratic person in office, we have a Republican. No, we have this person in office who comes from this party or is a part of this party. And I think that creates that type of conversation. So yeah, let's look more at that a little bit. Okay, Eileen.
And back to number 5.
Yes.
Okay, syncing with the state, which would mean having it either in a presidential election year, or having it when the governor race, or just the third option is to leave it as it is in an off year.
So I think that poll that, they did the poll, and I think it came out pretty close between, I think the state, state/county cycle and keeping it ourselves. I think the presidential one came in last, right, in that poll anyway. But it was pretty close between voters wanting to keep it city only, or merge it. And, keeping it city lets us have our own identity that we've had, even though, the turnout may be smaller. Putting it with the state county is the cost savings, right? And the help.
Even with the presidential. I mean, if you look at, if the question is, should we sync it? And you combine if you combine the people that said presidential and you combine that with the people that said go with the state elections, it's pretty much overwhelmingly people were in favor of considering syncing it in an election year as opposed to an off year.
So which ballot is smaller? I guess the presidential ballot would be smaller than the state county ballot.
Right.
Because what I've heard is a concern with being down ballot.
Yeah, as it shouldn't be, as it should not be. Now, if we're going to adopt this, now this is just speaking out there based off of the ask or question or recommendation. If we would adopt the state code and then sync it with the state, our election essentially would no longer be Annapolis city election. I mean, our elections would be bound to the state having most control. Now, within that shift the board, would that then shift our input in the elections? Where would we have still that identity of it being our election if everything we're doing at this point would be giving the state that full authority there?
Right.
I'm not sure I understand what that means. I mean,
they would manage so the county is managing our elections. It says so that they can manage more of the election. But it says so that they can manage more of the election process. So now we're saying, okay, they're going to manage more of the election process. Our election is going to be in sync, possibly with the county and or state or the state elections. And so I'm just.
Well, what it allows, I think what they meant by more possibly is that it allows us to utilize the technology of the state. It allows us to utilize the polling places. It provides for some consistency for the voters of Annapolis when they are voting. Right now, in an off year, it means different polling places, different year.
I really would love to see that if we could do what the conversation was with having separate ballots. Because it should the city should still be at the center with the full support and help of the county and state. So if there was a way, I know there was a conversation at some point of it maybe or maybe not being the case, but I think that if that could be the case, that would be the best.
Well, I guess my question would be how is having 2 ballots, meaning somebody goes in and does 1 ballot, then they go into another room and do a second ballot. How is that better than the concern about voting down ballot?
Well, if I'm a voter, yeah, I mean, I see how that. But if I'm a voter and I'm walking in and I know that okay, I have the state and city elections today, I am voting in my state election. Maybe I'm saying, okay, now I'm not. I don't the city election. I'm not living here often. I'm not.
So
I
you
don't
don't, you just don't answer that part of the ballot.
exact. So, but though I think it doesn't give over the entire overseeing to the state.
Right.
I don't.
Well, let's just stick with what your concern is. So
Which is that?
Yeah, I think we might go away. I mean, bows might not be needed if we fully
it won't.
comply, right? So we would be losing, to Keanu's point, we would not be around, we would not be doing or overseeing anything. And that's okay if the greater good, if we're hitting our measures, if we're doing what is needed, I'm all for it. But a 2 ballot thing on the same day, no, I think we would lose. I think voters would do one or the other. They wouldn't have time. They wouldn't want to check in. We'd need to have the space. We'd need the judges. I just think if we do not do our own year with ourselves like we've had, and if we do go with one of the others, we just really need to, and even if we stay around in some form, ours could be an education or a publicity form where we just make sure voters know to go down ballot, to vote for everybody that they, or maybe what's important to them, but they're going to have to, we're just going to have to try to get people to look at everything.
Yeah, and if we did, it would require us to be in separate rooms. I mean, a person couldn't receive, instead of down ballot, 2 different ballots. Is that something that couldn't happen? When I think, because it really, as we just said, it's taking away our city power in an election. And so, is that would we then have a spot on the county board or the state board? Like, would the city have representation there? Would we? Because that's key. Because now we're talking about our code being fully being fully resembling of the state, and all of those things. And it's giving me the same conversation which we said, and it's not, come on, I'm just saying this to kind of play around, but it's the same conversation not within our board but with the city, when we questioned whether or not we should be syncing the police department with the county interstate. Now that, no, like that's giving all this power away to the larger government, which things like that should be local. We're talking about knowing our neighbors and our friends, and that was the point of the ranked choice voting. If I have 2 people that I really like running for office, there's 3, and I like, oh my gosh, like, this is my neighbor over there, this person up the street has been so nice to me, I want to vote for both. I can vote then for both of them, 1, 2, and I'm done. Whereas we're talking about this, and this does not give us, it's more so in a direction of handing things over, and not in a direction of progressing and reforming what we have.
I'm going to go back to what you've said earlier, which is, let's look at the voter.
Sure.
Positive things for a voter is consistency. Consistency in polling places, consistency in laws, consistency in how elections are run, consistency, access, and security. I believe that this sinking in will give us that. It also will produce cost savings of potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I think on a local level could be used elsewhere.
Could we, if we do that, Eileen, if we decide that, and not only would that be transformational, but if we decided that we should ensure that the board still would remain, and that we would have still the ability to have a part in the elections, whereas, okay, the Annapolis Board of Supervisors of Elections are here,
What would we do? What would we do? What would be our role?
if that's, let's say we feel that the state just changed their code, and we have to make some updates and do some research so that we can make it more make it better for our residents who are here in the city. Maybe our residents will say, hey, the state just
There's
passed
still
this,
an opportunity to do that, because we're all also county residents. So there's the opportunity to work through in terms at a county level. So I'm not sure having a board of elections. I mean, I think Talbot has their board of elections has like 1 person, which I think is really just somebody that's there as a placeholder until they have an election, and then they have some others. But I'm not really clear. I mean, we're talking about syncing with state law. We're talking about having the county, run the election. So I think that we need to be somewhat realistic as what would a board of elections in that scenario provide? If you're talking about from a voter standpoint, if there's concerns, there is ability to work through the county board of supervisors. So it's not like nothing, but again, I guess I would
Like
just,
campaign fund reports, for example, like the finance reports. Would the state now, they would just do it on the system, and they would handle all it, and that, yet again, that's, come on, board. I mean, it's been
what
going for all these years. I don't like seeing a
what
use
what
of the board of supervisors of elections of like our Annapolis
about
board.
having the state do the campaign fund reports is a bad thing?
No, I don't think it's a bad thing, though. It's just the option of our power being relinquished in a city election. I mean, I don't like to see. I wouldn't want to see that in our city. I regardless of how long all of us remain, I think that the work of the board is so crucial to being relative to what the voter in the city of Annapolis wants and needs. Now, would our voices be ignored if something takes place where the city residents are saying, "Well, I'm no longer satisfied with this" at some point in the future? I'm just, speaking of all of these things that may arise.
I think people have said through the questionnaire that was sent out that people do want to change. And
Not
so,
fully, though.
okay,
Not
so
fully.
if our
City should not
role,
just say yes just because it was almost there.
if our role is to speak for the voters, and what people are saying, the voters seem to be in favor, or at least the people that expressed it in the questionnaire seem to be in favor of considering syncing with the state.
So let's make it a ballot question. I think that that's something, if we can go do a ballot question and we talk about, all these ballot question thoughts, I think that one is one
Well,
that
and
should
that has been, okay, and that has been one of the recommendations from the Charter Revision Commission. But we are in, our power is to come up with the process for that. So we still need to get that done. So,
Right.
The buck stops right here. So if you want to get a ballot question, this group needs to get their act together and get that done.
Sure.
Okay.
Can we move on to 6?
Yes, let's go. Yeah, I know it's 8:05. And we don't have to, of course, go there.
All right, the city should leverage the savings generated by moving to a statewide election cycle to fund a public campaign financing program. This came late in the discussions with the task force, and I think it was influenced because of the county moving in this direction. So I think it's an interesting idea, but I certainly personally need more information on it.
So, okay. Yeah. Because public finance is usually from the public, though technically, since it is the savings, it's still is that the public's money?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That sounds a little bit.
Yeah, that's not ready for prime time yet.
Okay, so we can move on to 7.
Let's go to the next one.
Board of Supervisors of Elections should be expanded, and unaffiliated voters should be allowed to serve. This is something that the Charter Revision Commission came up with. Again, it would possibly become moot depending on if some of the other things are adopted in regards to the state or syncing with the state. So it's certainly something that seems to be a possibility, but there needs to be a process for implementing it.
So when we think of a process for implementing it, would the question go out to those who are unaffiliated or of a different party if there was some type of expansion, and then they would apply? Because there are many unaffiliated, we know that there are many unaffiliated persons out there. So we would just, share in the messaging that, and this just talking, we would share in the messaging, hey, if you're interested in running and you're of the unaffiliated, the Board of Supervisors of Elections for the first time is going to expand its board and also have included at least 1 to 2 persons that are not of the party system, two-party system. And so it could, that direction kind of seems, then the mayor at the time, or however the appointment process would go, they would appoint the persons to the board as we were, and we applied, or we were actually, kind of put, you know what I'm saying. But I think since they don't have parties, they would apply. Whereas for us, it's really recognition from the Central Committee. So
well, it could be in a number of different forms. And again, that is the work that we were being asked to consider. So that's something on our to-do list.
Okay.
okay.
Okay, number 8, the Board of Supervisors of Elections should draft regulations clarifying the process for placing questions on the ballot.
Yeah, we already agree on that one, so you can.
Right, but we haven't agreed on the process.
Yeah.
We haven't drafted a process yet.
No, and I know we talked about the process, whether it would be the voter amount of persons that could sign on to a petition or what have you, whether it would be the city council to propose these things, and whether it would be binding or non-binding. I know we talked about that for ballot questions. Well, I think we should take a little more time because you did that research, which thank you so much. Because
Right.
maybe we can dive a little, because I know some of this we can take maybe a couple more weeks or so to really read through.
Let's keep in mind with anything that we want to get done for the 2025 election, we need to get it done by next February. We need to get it done at our next meeting. And it needs to go to the council in March in order to be done by June. Because the election calendar starts end of July. So we've got to put words to paper.
Now with agreed. Okay.
So,
With the please, Eileen. But I was Debbie. I was going to say though, I think the only concerns we were having is the city council being able to just come forth at any point in time, just willy-nilly, and get the support based off their point, or whether a person can just get a city council person that they may have favor with to put out a ballot question on and turn into a piece of legislation to bring forth to the city council. And I think that's what the main concern. And I don't think we disagreed on the fact that, a petition should, if we do get signatures, that could be a way. I don't think we had any concerns there. It's just the amount of persons that we were questioning. Debbie, what were you going to say?
Yeah. Take to your point, similar. I would like to know what our mayor and council think on this, because they're leaders. They're in the weeds all the time as city leaders, and do they want to be able to put a ballot question, a question on the ballot? Like, have any of them ever thought, wow, I really, this would be great to have on the ballot? Like, how many times and how often does that occur where, the mayor or an alderman or a group, a committee, one of the different committees thinks, oh, this really should be a ballot question? Like, is the need, have our current or former leaders wanted this? Would be something I would like to know. And then also, are there community groups who have asked for this or tried to get this in the past? And like the need, I'd like to know. It makes sense to me that we definitely should have a process for putting questions on the ballot. But then again, if we don't, has there not been a need?
And will we sync with the state on that? I mean, will we then follow their process if we just took on their code? I know
our process is somewhat similar to the state. To answer your question, Debbie, yes, there have been people that have asked about ballot questions. And the drawback always has been is we don't have the percentage. We actually have a process. We don't have what we say, how many they need.
Okay.
And so that's really the sticking point for the current situation. The second one comes up in terms of the question has come up, would it, suppose the city council wanted just to put on a ballot question, and this came about with the Charter Revision Commission because they said it's been punted around for so many years. Maybe that's saying that city council members don't want to make these decisions. So let's give it to the people to do it. But that means that there needs to be an individual or a group of individuals that take it on. It's not easy to get a ballot question put forth. So that's where it came up saying, well, could the city council do it? And I believe that the county can do it. It may have to do with the charter. And so certainly things like, certain things that are on the charter might be easier than city code types of things. So like nonpartisan versus partisan. And most of this has come about because of the interest in nonpartisan elections for the ballot question. So there's really, 3 elements. One is the percentage of voters, which is lacking in the current code. And then if we wanted to expand it so that the city council could, and I think that's a good question. What do the aldermen want? That would be something to get some feedback from in terms of a work session or even just talking to them on an individual basis. And then there's also the concept of binding versus non-binding. I sent you all what types of ballot questions is done on the state level, which would probably be different than what we're thinking of. We're probably thinking of something a little bit more general that somebody can bring up. So it's not as simple as just saying we're going to do what the state does, because I'm not sure what the state does really allows for what we're thinking. And that, depending on what type of ballot questions that you would do, that somewhat helps in terms of determining if you're going to go with a binding versus a non-binding. One of the things that we didn't consider last month when we were talking about binding versus non-binding is you can have a binding but also have a threshold. So
there
you
we
can
are.
say
Yes.
it's binding, but you have to have, say, 60% of the voters. So if it's a 50-50, it doesn't go, or even if it's like a 55-45, you can put a threshold on it. So if it's a certain threshold, it's binding. If it's below that, it's non-binding. So that's just something new that I had looked in, had seen when I was doing some of the additional research that I forwarded to you all.
Okay. So I, for one, the next steps are, because we have the research here for binding versus non-binding. The next steps are, will they include us pretty much deciding which percentage or amount of because threshold. Now, when you talk about majority, that's usually the threshold. Majority, okay. Those 5 people ran to the ballot to cast their ballot, and
no, you're jumping ahead.
No, I just
started with percentage. So
okay, so with percentage of the voter, so I think 8,000. We were talking about 8,000 possibly being signatures needed in order to. I think that was the number we discussed.
Well, most of it goes by a percentage of the registered voters.
Right,
like
at the
20%.
time.
Weren't we talking? Isn't that what the state does? 20?
There's all different types.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I mean, it's hard to compare it with the state because they go by if I recall, looking at how many people voted in the governor's, it just
That's
changed.
right. Yeah.
It really could be something that is determined here. So there's about 29,000 registered voters in the city of Annapolis. Now that changes. So if you did 20% of that, we're talking about
35,000.
No, you'd be talking about 20% of.
Yeah. But we want, I guess, do we want it to be easy or hard? I mean, are these ballot questions supposed to be rare or often? And who decides not only on the percentage of vote, but is there a decision whether it can even, beyond, like, would the Board of Elections put parameters as to even what type of subjects can be covered when
Well,
you go out to the voters.
Oh, yeah, if you're familiar with the code, you would see that it goes through the Office of Law.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. But I'm for making it possible for someone to do it. You know, I don't think we want to make it so difficult that, you know, it's insurmountable. I don't know if 5,000 is too much to ask.
We generally do a percentage because the number is
Right.
always going to change.
Yeah, so if that's like 20%, maybe 10%.
I was really thinking about a 10 15,
Yeah.
and that's because that's giving, let's say this is like really a section of the 30-30-30 ideal that we have for our party of unaffiliated, what have you, and Democrat,
Yeah.
Republic. So just having like a part of at least a sector, and maybe it's a combination of people that came together. Let's look at what that number would be. Hopefully it'd be less than 8. I'm pretty sure it'd be less than 8,000.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
40,000. I mean, that's 4,000 right there. 40, if you say 40, well, that's the residents, not just say the registered voters.
Well, 10% would be requiring up to 3,000 signatures.
Yeah, if we're looking
Say
at
we have 30,000 voters.
28,000 vote. Yeah, if we're looking at that, I was looking at but yeah, if we have 28,000, 3,000 now, 3,000 is more realistic. That's about a ward. You know, that's almost pretty much that's as if so let's say a ward stands up and they say I want to put a petition on about. I think that's very significant there. Which yeah, I think that's very significant there. So Eileen, what would you recommend? Because I think we're kind of on a path to agreeing to something here, but what would you recommend the necessary requirement of us suggesting that would be? Would that say we just have to make sense of why 10% would be the best?
Well, I think we have to look and see look at what other jurisdictions are doing and what the state does. I think we have to have a rationale for why we pick a certain number.
Well, just because we think it's fair or we think it's best. I mean, I'm fine with 2,000. I mean, if we we can research, and I love to study and research all this, but I mean, we kind of looked at this and people were saying, you know, like you said, the state looks at the governor's election and it can get pretty tricky. But we're just a simple little city. We want to keep
10%.
things
Yeah, 10% right there.
easy.
Very
Yeah.
straightforward, very.
So you're saying
Of
you
all
just
voters,
need
right? Yeah, of all voters.
2,900.
Mm-hmm.
And generally what you would say, based on the research I gave you last month, was you want to aim for 20%. When somebody's collecting it, they're going to aim for 20% more because.
Yeah, errors.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're 20% more than 10%, so 30% is what you're saying?
Well, we're not saying that that's what they do, but if I were to say, I want to get, I'm going to take the chart, the lead on this. And if you tell me I need 2,900, I'm going to shoot to really get probably 3,500 signatures because
15%.
through them, there's going to be attrition, some that are
20.
going to be knocked out.
Right.
But the code would say 10%, but you have to get more than that because of mistakes.
Right.
Now, how do you know, like, how is that determined? Because of mistake,
Well, there's no, I mean, I've done it. I've been in petition drives and there's people who sign them who are out of the area, there are
plus
people
one, like a plus one, I
can't read it. There's people who are, not registered who sign because they believe in it, so they sign it, but they forget that they're not registered or especially if they don't live there. So sometimes when you put especially if you're at a group and people, people sign and they don't realize they're really not qualified to sign, but they sign it. So you have to go over your amount.
When we do the verification process, right? Okay.
Right. And then the question comes up, I mean, the county You know, does the county do it or do we do it? So, I mean, you have to work with, we would have to work with the county in terms of identifying them, but it, you know, it could, I imagine it could be a heavy load.
Yeah, I would think so.
And this wouldn't require legislation at the state level or anything. Would this?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
So because it's already been a lot of research and conversation about this, about it now, if we have to kind of put it in some type of, detailed form to explain why, I can see that's one thing, though. I'm really feeling, and I think that 10 to 15%, maybe if it's even that 20 to make it, when they're doing the actual, I think that's a comfortable range there. Because we're all, I mean, that we took
Yeah,
into
10's
account
good.
all of the factors. We took into account the cluster of persons who may be able to, have access to doing this realistically. 8,000 to going from 3,000 and 8,000 comparing the two. I think 3,000 is pretty realistic. I'm just going to knock door on my neighbors in my ward or what have you, or outside that. And I think it's possible for organizations too, nonprofits or what have you, to be able to do that groundwork easily as well, especially our local nonprofits and organizations, if it's a local ballot initiative, of course. So what's the next step there for that? I mean, are we gonna do we want to wait? Do you want to hold off until our next meeting too to really finalize everything that we've talked about today? Like what? So I think for that one matter, we kind of got to get that one done. And so what? If we're
Is
gonna look,
Ashley, does she, if we tell her what we're agreeing to, then they would write it up. The Office of
yeah,
Law
let's
would write
let's
it.
do that, please.
Yeah.
Hey, Ashley, are you available at all?
She had
Eileen,
a-
are you
she had
okay?
issues.
Oh,
She's
okay.
I'm here.
Oh, hey.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't actually write it up. It would be Cynthia in my office who writes it up. But yeah, if you vote on it with enough specifics, we can give it to her. Regina can pass it on to her tomorrow and she can start working on a draft.
oh,
And then I would do the legal review on it.
Right. She has some of that she's already started on.
Yeah, I mean, she is already working on some stuff, but if you've made a definitive decision about what you want to see and what percentages, then I would vote on that and you can give it to her.
So I'm just now recalling that there was a ballot. Regina, maybe you can come in when Gibreneau, when he was running for mayor, was that a ballot question or was that for him having to be on the ballot?
He was an independent, right? Yeah.
That wasn't a ballot question.
Well, no, it wasn't a ballot question. Mr. Renaud ran for mayor as an independent. So he met the qualifications of having 50 registered voters per ward. And he brought his petition in and the board reviewed it based on the roles that the county provided to us. So, and then we certified him and his name was placed on the general election ballot, not the primary.
Well, that's an interesting concept though, was you needed to have broad support. He needed to have
for the mayor citywide, yes.
Yeah, which is something I hadn't really considered.
So are you saying, Eileen, possibly getting a certain amount from every ward in the city?
For the mayoral candidates. That's a citywide election.
Right. Yeah. It's just a point that I hadn't thought of in relation to ballot.
Same, but for a ballot question.
For ballot questions. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So you said
a ballot question would cover the whole city. So that's not a bad.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Is that what you're implying? Because I getting 100 or so, or let's say you got to get 150, 200 from each ward based off the percentage of 10% ward, citywide. It just, we would have to verify by ward.
Well, it's just something to consider. If you're saying you need 3,000 signatures to get you could say of those 3,000, you have to have a minimum of 250 in each ward. That's another level. It's not in our current process. It's another qualifying.
3,000 divided by 8.
Well,
that's about 375 per ward.
Right. Well, you're not going to get it completely even. You don't want to put it that
right.
because there's certain ballot questions that are going to be more amenable or more interest to certain
Yeah,
wards.
you don't want a certain ward to have the advantage. So no, I'm not signing that. You don't want to cause that.
Well, no, I'm looking the other way, saying that there's going to be some that are going to be, it's going to be hit closer to home than others, but you do want to have at least the ability for, or consider having the ability for broad support.
Yeah,
Sure.
like both ways. Oh my, so that's kind of further conversation. Well, let's just do the numbers. Let's just do the numbers right quick and see if it's realistic. So we said that can we generalize 30,000 registered voters in the city?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 30,000 registered voters in the city. If we said that a 10% threshold, that would require for, of course, 3,000. I mean, we can do that math ourselves. But if say 3,000 divided by, let's say, just we want to see about all 8 wards. Let's say you got to get some from every ward. That's 375. We said.
Right.
Now, if we want to say realistically, you have to get at least 100, or 150. Because we're going to divide 375 but 2, so like 180. So if you say, okay, 150, you have to get at least 100 or 150 from each ward. That ties into what you just said, Eileen, but it doesn't limit me to be able to get the rest of the signatures where I'm from, or in the areas that I know it may impact more. I think that and it also that causes for unity. I mean, that's what it is, because I'm going to have to get a consensus across the city before I even propose a citywide ballot. This is, so I'm with that.
Yeah, like 100 would be good.
Yeah. So can we comfortably say 10% of the registered voters and at least 100 from each ward?
Each ward, yeah. I could go with that.
And I think people would be very pleased by that. I mean, one, because we're creating a process, and two, because it's not too out of reach for the people being able to put a ballot question on the city ballot. So Eileen, what are your thoughts on that before we move forward? Because Ashley said if we just say what we would like to see, they can, and I think that's enough detail for them to be able to do the numbers and things of that nature. But are you comfortable with that for the people?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can move forward. I mean, I don't think the process is going to change, except maybe be a little clearer, and then just adding those components. We still haven't, and we don't have to put in binding versus non-binding or the city council at this point. So it again, but that's up to this group. Do you want to move forward with that, or?
We didn't, if we want to talk about binding, non-binding, because that is a piece of this. Though in my mind, I'm always thinking it's binding because it's, that's what the people said, and it's citywide now. So, it's less convoluted there. But with the research you gave, I would like to kind of compare a little bit more on it, though. I still kind of stick by my thoughts of the binding. Now, how about you, Debbie? What do you?
Well, there's also maybe maybe you could do a time limit or a pilot, program that if and again, it's hard not knowing the issue, not knowing the question and how big of a deal it is. Is it a big deal, a small deal? Is it going to affect everyone? Is it going to affect one area? It's hard to say, but I think it wouldn't hurt to make some kind of layers where either it needs to be a threshold, or that it will be a consensus or a unanimous city council. Like if the like the leadership has to be on board too, maybe a majority of council needs to mandate or approve it maybe as well, or that it comes as a pilot for 3 years or something. But it's hard not knowing the question.
Do we feel comfortable with 16,500? Because I multiplied, of course, 55% of a threshold if all 30,000 of our voters turned out one day, and that would be 16,500. But let's say an average election turnout in a ward, I'll say 5. Well, it's citywide, so let me do.
I don't know. I'm not ready to say with this one yet. I'd like to find out. I need to talk to aldermen or something about how they would feel if there are leaders, there are elected leaders, and some of them have been there a long time. And what they would feel about, I don't care necessarily what they feel about ballot questions, but I would like to know what they feel about binding versus non-binding when you're a leader, an elected leader, and this might.
I think it would be helpful if you haven't had a chance to, and I need to do this also, is look at what is available in Maryland, and that's going to determine some of this. I sent that all to you all in terms of the types of things. And maybe Ashley can help us at the next meeting if we want to do something that isn't in sync with what Maryland allows at this point. That type of thing will probably require legislation changes. So this may not even be something we can do at this point, because right now, the state of Maryland allows for 4 different types of ballot measures, and I'm not sure what we're talking about fits completely in any of those 4. So I think that will help guide us in terms of moving forward with that.
Okay.
Well, it's 8:30.
Right.
Can we move quickly on to then 9, which is concerning term limits?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, let's do it. So that's a recommendation I will fully stand behind with the people on that one, based off the results of the survey as well as just what we know to be right. Now, I know the question was 3 terms for the city council. I think that was what the test was.
3 4-year terms.
So, 3 4-year terms, which if we're moving in that step, I know that the county council, they had term limits and they increased it back, after the election. I think this was the last past election or so before. And so if we want to inch towards cutting it down, then I think a 3-term is definitely a place to start for that. And it also creates that conversation.
Yep.
Now, are we talking about consecutive?
Yeah.
Or are we just doing a total of
consecutive?
Well, are you sure consecutive? So you're telling me that it has to, because if it's total, I think I can serve 2 years and then I can serve 2 terms and I'm gonna come back another one and serve my last one.
Yeah, you can come back, but it's no more than 3 full consecutive 4-year terms. So no more than 12 years in that same position in a row. But you can move to mayor, you can sit out and come back.
So we're saying just for one specific office, you cannot have more than 12 years total.
One specific office.
8 years. So yeah. So
but Debbie, you're using the word consecutive.
Yeah, consecutive.
Different than what Keanu is saying. You're saying consecutive, and Keanu is saying you could serve 2, take 4 years off, and come back for a third.
Total. Yep, it's a total 12.
So
I'm saying consecutive. I'm saying, and that's what it says in here in their recommendations, is 12 years in a row, and then you're out. You either move to a different office or you take a break.
Now, though, if you're saying that's saying that the candidates then kind of forced to serve their last term now. Or because if let's say I got my 2 terms and I'm gonna go out and allow for this person to come in because I feel like that's right, and then I'll come back now that it's a different time. I'm 10 years older, what have you. I come back and I run and I win. That would be my last term. Are you saying my terms would restart?
No, you restart.
Okay,
you restart.
So that's the difference of the consecutive now.
So then you're saying you could do another 3 years. You could do another 12 years.
Yeah, I mean, if you could do 12 years, take a break, and do another 12 years.
I don't think that's the intention of the task force.
Oh.
Yeah, we're saying that it's 12, or at least for me, we're in agreement with the whole 12 total. Now that would allow
that's different than what I thought.
Yeah, it would still allow for someone to take a break though, or allow for the people to have better or different options for at least that one time. But if I came back, then that would be my last term to be able to serve. Now that's upon the candidate who decides to come
But
back.
I think they said what I said. When I'm reading this,
That's what
I
I'm
think-
trying to look it up.
I think it's
Yeah.
what I think. It says, we support term limits of no more than 3 full consecutive 4-year terms. So 3 full consecutive 4-year terms is 12 years.
Yeah.
So you can do 12. You can take a break or move to mayor.
So take one term break. Is that what
Yeah,
that's
take a
saying?
4-year break, and you can come back and do another 12 years if you're elected every time.
I think it's a total of 12. It's just what it says.
I think only because the code uses consecutive that maybe they were just using the terminology of the code there. But I'm thinking they're saying 3 total because
Well,
the mayor
I worked on
can't
this.
leave.
I mean,
The
I
mayor
worked on some of these bills at the state level, and it was specific. It was truly consecutive years. But if you moved to another office or another, or took a break, you could come back for 4, 8, 12, depending on if you win.
I think moving offices is completely different than taking a break. So moving offices is going to a different position, and I could see where that would restart it. But if you just take a break and come back, then you're not really putting a limit on it. Because you could, I mean, if you do 24 years, that's no offense, but that's not really a limit.
No, but you would have to win your spot back. You'd be out for 4 years, and then you would have to run and win.
But you always have to run and win for every term. So I understand where you're coming from. I think changing positions you can maybe do, but I think taking a break and then coming back, that's not really imposing a limit. In my personal opinion.
I agree.
I'm not really sure if that's how they wrote it and that was their intent, that's really vague language.
Okay.
And I frankly, I'm not, that's like, if the intent was to put a limit on it, but you said you can take a break and come back, then you're not legally actually enforcing any sort of limit. That's not a limit. That's just saying you have to take a break, which is a whole different legal. Taking a break is not the same as putting a limit. A limit saying that once you hit a set number, you're done, regardless.
All right, I'll go along with that. I mean, I'm not digging in. I just thought it would restart. I didn't think it was you were done.
But restarting doesn't set a limit then. That's what I'm saying. Like,
well, I'm talking about a consecutive limit. It stopped your consecutive. The limit was stopped.
Consecutive means that you have to do it all in a row. It means you can't take any break at all. It does not imply though that you can take a break and reset the whole thing.
Okay, that's what I didn't know.
One step too far, to be honest.
Okay, so are we, Debbie, would you then see that 3 total terms where the break still can take effect, or someone leaving and come back for their last one? Hey, I'm coming back. I'm gonna serve for these last 4 or 5 total 12 years of possible.
That's fine.
Serve. So is this something that we can ask then for? Let's move on. Asking the law office of the Office of Law to kind of draft something or move forward on the drafting of this, so that when the ballot questions come about.
Well, I don't think we can go it quite that quickly because these recommendations still need to be reviewed by the city council. So, I think that we may be preempting that a little bit.
So nothing then tonight. I think tonight then is conversation, and there won't be really any motion on this at all of this report. We should just keep it as what it is, and maybe they'll decide. Maybe decide. Yeah, decide. Yeah, please.
Well, this is our first look at it, so
it is.
So how about moving on to 10, which is the Board of Supervisors of Elections should research the best practices for having the highest practical accuracy in voter rolls. The county maintains the voter rolls. So in this process, I kind of mentioned that Some people felt very strongly. I'm not quite sure. I mean, we can certainly take an education approach, but I think this was trying to address the concept that people are not coming off the rolls, that citizens are not, you know, they do a number of measures in terms of trying to do that. I did see one thing that is a possibility that we could do at this level. I'm not sure the county does it, but you can, when the mail-in ballots went out last year, the postal number was set up so that if it was an undeliverable, it got sent back to the Board of Elections. It didn't get forwarded. So if I had put in that I moved to Nebraska, if I wasn't at my address in Annapolis, it wouldn't have gotten necessarily forwarded to Nebraska. It would have gone back to the Board of Supervisors of Elections, which would let them know this person no longer lives in Annapolis. They now live in Nebraska. But what would happen is if people were getting, having ballots that were delivered to an address, and ideally people would have contacted the Board of Elections or just written undeliverable and put it back in the mail. So I think one of the things we could do is to educate people to know to do that. And apparently you can put it on, say, a ballot, or put it on, like if you send out a sample ballot, to start getting that process. So if it comes to my house and I'm like, oh, that person moved last year, on that ballot or on that piece of paper from the Board of Elections, it would have in prominent space, if the person no longer resides at this residence, return, so that's one way of perhaps doing it. I don't think, in light of the fact that we're not doing universal mail-in ballots, it's going to be quite the same issue in terms of ballot delivery, but it still is an issue in terms of trying to get the voter rolls cleaned up. Again, that's a county responsibility, but we could certainly talk with them to find out if there are some things that we could do to assist better with that.
Yeah, I agree. It's very easy to get on the voter rolls, but very hard to get off.
Right.
And I think that if we can at the city level for our elections, if we can allow a parent to take a child off, or if we can allow the voter to call or email.
Debbie, that's where we get into voter security. You can't, if you make it easy, there's nothing to keep somebody from going in and doing 100 of them.
Well, we need to make it harder to get on then, if we're making it so hard to get off.
Well, it goes both ways, but once a person's 18, they're an adult, so you can't be going in saying.
I just know that all three of our girls, and I mean I know that kids aren't taking. They're not writing a letter. Hardly anybody uses stamps anymore. If you talk to Keanu's age group, you guys, do you mail anything anymore?
Yeah,
I do.
That probably
I do.
We got to.
That's an indication for why that's a pro in terms of trying to access better technology through the State Board of Elections. So
yeah,
I just want to be very cautious that anytime you make something easier in terms, you're opening the opportunity for fraud. So it is, we've been through this before. It is the responsibility of the voters. I think in terms of trying to address this particular thing, we can also talk with this county to see if they have any ideas for us to do. And also, that was just one idea that I came across in terms of.
Well, did you get your county? Did you get your did you get this? Yeah. Well, look what it says. That's right. It. Can you see it? It says right here,
right,
in little print, if the person whose name on this envelope does not live at this address, please return this envelope to the Board of Elections. So I assume if people even read that, they can just put this back in the mailbox, right?
You can put it in a Dropbox, yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't need stamp.
I don't know if that's prominent enough.
Well, we can ask for it to be bigger.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, we could ask it to be bigger. And
I mean, did you guys see it when you got it?
maybe set to the side.
That's where I saw it.
Did you see it, Keanu?
Yeah, I have actually, I have two of them.
Yeah. Yeah, but why'd you get two?
I'm
But
not, I was-
anyway, but do you think, I mean, we're looking for this stuff. I just don't know.
We can only do so much.
I know.
So it's a
But that's a good start. That's a good start.
step forward. Okay. Number 11 is the city should not universally mail out ballots to non-emergency situations.
Yeah,
I think we
you
already
already know.
decided that.
Yeah,
you-
for this election, y'all know how I feel about this, and
Okay.
I won't deny, Eileen, that I looked up some legislation. I mean, some not legislation more than it was the articles that were written from the previous election about this, and you know, I saw some of the comments that were made, and the I know I did actually watch that meeting. I believe with the two, it was just you two. I'm on the call, and how necessary it was because of the COVID situation that we were still kind of dealing with, but you know, I'm dealing with at the time, especially. So I get the need for that, though I do believe that it's not something that should just be taken away and not offered. I do want to emphasize that I do believe the mail out ballot, we should have mail out ballots for this election, though. I'm glad that we're putting things in place to make sure that voters still get the access to mailing in a ballot, though we only call it absentee, so we got to update the code to call it mail in.
What I'd like to propose, so this is kind of jumping forward a little bit. We've talked essentially about encouraging the use of absentee ballots. I would like to propose that we replace if we're looking at city code, I would like to propose or put a motion forward that we replace our current absentee ballot code with a mail-in voting / ballot procedure that is consistent with the state. Meaning people can opt in for a mail-in. We can send out the application and they can opt in for a mail-in ballot. I think that was the intent of what we wanted, but I think it behooves us to go ahead and actually take out absentee ballots in our code because it's no longer in the state code. Is my understanding with talking with Cynthia, and then draft an actual procedure which would be consistent with the state, probably with a couple of little caveats, because we don't have the opportunity to download ballots and some of the technology types of things. But I think that might be the clearest way of approaching it. So I know I'm kind of jumping ahead on that, but I'm also
now is that then because it would be the opt-in method primarily, so it's not, I know they at one point in time they did it automatically, but of course they no longer do it automatically either. So I mean, I'm not opposed to the opt-in method for people that stay at that residential area, what have you, for long periods of time. I think that it makes sense to give the ability to, but we should update the code anyway to take out absentee. I agree. I'm with that fully. Let's take out the absentee, and just because when I was doing our entire report for the year, and I was putting an absentee, I was like, we got to change absentee to mail in. So I could, yeah, let's if we can do that now. Do we have to fully adopt the full definition of what the state says, though?
Well, we have to. The motion is to take out absentee voting from our code and to insert a code on mail-in ballots. So it's not specific. It's just saying we're going to take that out and we're going to replace it with a mail-in ballot system consistent with the state.
Consistent, not identical.
Consistent.
Right? Okay, I'm with that. Debbie, are you able to second that?
Well, so the state, I think, says you can choose, I want to receive a mail-in ballot for all future federal and state elections. Mark your choice on the included form or online, and we will automatically send you a mail-in ballot for all future federal and state elections. That's from the Maryland State Board of Elections. And I'm a little guarded about that because it's an automatic, indefinitely, forevermore, you're going to automatically get a mail-in ballot for federal and state elections until
you get to choose,
forever.
You get to choose.
Because you're probably not going to maybe when Social Security lets them know you died, but you could have
There-
moved.
That's an example of something that we can't do in the city because we don't have the opportunity, we don't have access to online. So that's why I'm saying consistent with.
Hmm.
So we would need to be drafting something that's consistent with what we can do at this point. That would be a point at which you could say it has to be done every time we have an election if you wanted to
Right.
do it. So
Yeah,
it's gonna be
I feel,
consistent. So I
And
just,
I was actually going to, I think that if we can send it out every election, that would absolutely be the best
So-
choice there.
the motion put forth is to move forward in that direction. It's not getting into specifics.
Yeah.
It's just saying, and that will allow some legislation to be drafted for Cynthia, and would be something that we would ideally be able to implement in 2025. And again,
Although-
this goes into some consistency.
Yeah, I was going to say, although we said no motions on this tonight, this one right here, we can absolutely move
Well,
forward
we
on.
didn't say
Uh,
that we're,
we said we were going to kind of hold off the review it.
There's
Though
certain things-
this year,
there's certain things, and this is one of the things that we've identified as needed for the 2025. So
and that's why I'm saying,
I have a
absolutely.
motion on the floor.
Debbie, are you able to second that motion?
yes, I'll second.
Okay, great. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Eileen, for that motion.
Right, I wanted to get that because I know we're kind of running a little late and get that clarified. And that came about from looking at the annual report and realizing that we really didn't make a definitive answer about.
No,
That's-
but this right here is necessary, especially as we move forward to that option. Okay. Is this the last? Is this the last? No?
Yes,
Yes?
that was the
Okay.
last.
Okay. So let's move forward on this agenda, you all, please. I think for the focus priorities, Eileen, part of that was the research you provided, and I think we kind of went over. I mean, that that was pretty much everything. I don't think we really have to. Is there much more right now on that, on the focus and priorities? I think
Done
this was.
the ballot questions, the absentee ballot. I don't have what we've done in the past, but I don't think there's anything that we haven't covered that we need to cover
Yeah, I
tonight.
think that was everything. I think both of them kind of worked hand in hand, which I'm glad about. Okay, well, let's go to the amended campaign fund reports if we can.
Okay, so the amended reports, there were four that were outstanding that we still needed to get. Alderman Arnett submitted his is compliant. Friends of Gavin Buckley submitted theirs. They also made a notation that they discovered in looking back that they had paid something. They paid it once, but they put it in twice. So they adjusted their form for November 3rd, 2021 to June 27th, I think it is 2023. So it created kind of a ripple effect, but they did a good job of identifying it and then correcting it. So the only thing that really was outstanding as of today was the headings. And so my understanding is that the treasurer did go in and add them. So it's compliant now. Alderman Schandelmeyer submitted his. He did make the changes in regards to the transfers and moving it over to column 3 and adding the headings that were missing.
Tierney.
Still think there was some initials that still needed to be added, but I think we can pass on them. And then the fourth one is Alderman Tierney submitted hers. Of the 29 lunches with constituents that we had been expressing some
Concern.
concern or questioning, they felt that in review that they would be considered fundraising and that it was a different mode of fundraising rather than have one fundraiser. So they have submitted their amended form with using the code fundraising.
Okay.
They have taken out the the payment, it was like $96 or something like that, for flowers for the St. John's College president. That reimbursement has not shown up in their report yet, but it certainly can be done in the next report. I don't think we have to hold this up or add another amended report. It can just be done for this current year. So the question becomes, are we, given that they are now, I think, they've submitted, I guess I can read you. I guess you didn't get the justification for
Yeah, I
it.
was gonna say we didn't really.
So I think I have it. Let me read it to you.
Okay.
Because this just came in today.
Mhm.
Okay. Their response is, where the board finds these expenditures as related to the ordinary course of holding office and not to conducting a campaign, we have reviewed the intent of those and understand the confusion caused when they were described as lunch with constituent. The expenditures have been revised to reflect their intent. They were all in the spirit of the campaign of seeking to enhance and promote the success of my campaign using outreaches to potential voters. Our current and amended campaign fund report carries the appropriate description of meals with potential donors to enhance electability. The flowers to President of St. John College has been struck through as it has now become a personal non-campaign fund expense. The disbursement will be returned to the campaign. Please find our amended report attached to your records. So
Okay, so they gave the money back for the.
They're going to.
They're going to.
right.
For the,
I would think that before I even sent the report, that I would have sent that money back.
Well, it was just the decision, I believe, was just made today. So they can do it in the next. They've taken it out, so
Okay.
they just have to put it back in. I mean, we can hold off on. We can ask them to put in another amended report, or we can have them put it in the one coming up in July.
I think they need to take us to lunch.
Nah,
I think they need to give Eileen a big bottle of wine.
So in regards to consistency and accountability, and all of us we've learned a lot and had to really push ourselves to also be at the standards. No double standard or hypocrisy or anything here. I think if there's still needed work, it should be done as soon as possible, unless we're going to give a like a 30-day, or a 15-day, like we've done for many needed amendments.
Okay, what part of this are we talking about? There's two components here. One is the lunch with now donors, and then there's the St. John's College reimbursement. So
the
which one?
St. John's one, we should definitely get the information on the disbursement, or at least the refund to show, just to kind of get that out the way. If that's a little bit, if that's a minor, if you're saying we could hold off, we also can get it soon, because it's just sending the money back and just updating the.
It would require asking them for another amended report, which means we hold up all of these reports for public consumption. I think we just move forward and make a note to ourselves that it shows up in their next report.
I can do that. I'm fine with that.
So is this going to be for everyone, we're just going to say everything is fine until your next report?
No.
Except for Tierney.
We're just saying, in this situation, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if you want to have them do another amended report and hold it all up, we can do that. Otherwise, it's certainly within the parameters, since the check's being written now in this current year, that they reported in June. All the numbers are correct now. I mean, all the numbers jive. It's just that they have an outstanding piece that they have to submit. So if you want them
I feel like we should, because that's what we've done. I think if
Yeah.
now we have an excuse or reasoning for why this is the case, let's still hold it. We shouldn't just let them off and say, go ahead and give it to that's the next. I think we still should be holding them accountable, because that's just what, especially lately, I think all of us have been held at that, and I think we should
all right,
maintain.
I will
that.
ask them to cut the check for $996 and whatever cents and put it in and redo the amended form, and then we'll look at it next month.
I think we should. Yeah, I think that would be
But
at least
just want
because
everybody.
now it's the responsibility. Because if go ahead, please.
All right, that means that all of these reports are not being accessed by the public. All of the, they all go up at one time. So I personally feel that this is something that can be rectified in the next report. I feel that it's now January and we still have not posted these amended reports. And if we delay it, we won't be doing it until February.
Well, it is an off year, so I don't know how many people, are looking at them or care, but I can go either way on it. I can see both sides. I'm getting, I can imagine you, Eileen, how, this is babysitting.
It's not that. To me, the greater good is that these should be released to the public. And if I'm understanding Regina correctly from what she told me earlier today, until they're all done, they're held up in terms of being posted. Is that correct, Regina? I don't know if she's still there.
I am here. Yes, you are correct.
So you're saying we can't post their okay? So we can't post their report.
We would need to have your completed analysis to go along with the reports to post them all. That's why Eileen is saying that it's okay for them just to continue until we receive the next report. We send out in April, I'm going to be sending out the report saying you have to turn in your campaign fund report due for 2023 in July 1st. So, I mean, it's only like 3 months.
I mean, the analysis will say this is an outstanding thing. This is what you need to do. You need to include it in your next report.
Now, is that what we've done commonly? Is that something that you've all have done commonly, where you've allowed for them to?
If you want her to send in another amended report, if we notify her tomorrow, she still has 30 days, and that'll be after your February meeting. So you're looking at March.
Instead of, you said June.
That's what I'm saying. To finish up the work on her report, the code requires that she gets 30 days to amend her report. 30 days from notice.
They made and we're only talking about the one thing, the flowers. They've made the change we requested, which was take it out. So now we're saying, okay, they know they need to put it back in. We know they need to put it back in. It's a question of, do we have them put it back in on this report, or we have them put it in on the upcoming July report?
All right. So yeah, let's just move forward then in that way. If we're talking about the time kind of overlapping, we're kind of being near each other and we don't see it. I just want to make sure that if it is something that should be done, it should be done as soon as possible. If that's something that we shouldn't just be lenient again, because I know the conversation was we shouldn't be lenient on these. We should really start to stick to what is being said.
Well, I just want to let you know that Eileen was doing a great job following up with the people in their campaign amended reports. She's actually had conversations with the alderwoman and her treasurer on several occasions regarding the same issue. So giving them more time after all the conversations, I don't think it's going to do anything to change it.
We've had campaign discrepancies that have continued for a year before they were finally.
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly. And that has caused a lot. That caused a lot of. And so I want to just move forward, that not have that type of issue arise. But this is that major. I mean, I'm in that front, though. I'm just making sure, to what I know you all have expressed at the last meetings and the concern about these. That is, but Eileen, we trust that if you're saying that she's going to make sure it's done, then let's move forward on it. I just want to make sure that we're sticking by.
It's just a question of, does she report it now or does she report it next time?
Okay, so let's do it. Yeah, please, let's move, go. Make the yeah. Let's agree to this so we can move forward.
Okay, well that's one issue. So, all right, so I move that, well, it's not, I don't know if you even need,
Is it just the because we're approving
you
the,
have to accept the analysis. So
yeah,
right now for Alderman Tierney, it's saying, I mean, what you have up here is not the,
this is the pending
we
review.
recognize that the disbursement has been taken out and that the reimbursement will be submitted in the upcoming July one. So that's
Yeah.
our
That's what we got.
understanding.
So we can include that in the response. Yes.
Yes.
Right.
So
Okay.
then the other question becomes the 29 lunches, which they are now considering fundraising, or as they put, related. They put in-
Creative.
Debbie, don't let-
is
That's really
they
why I'm
have
saying.
meals with potential donors to enhance electability. And I believe they took that out of the Maryland State Code.
Ah,
I don't know if there's really anything in our code that would allow us to, I mean,
Approve of
not
it.
accept
really,
it.
it's really a question call. Do we believe it or not, or whatever? I'm not sure what we have to follow up
I
with.
think a lot of it comes from that sentiment of how it's been so iffy and off and on, like just how it's been so much question with it. That's the reason why I've been kind of saying what I'm saying, though. What would the option be here? I mean, we just say yes, it's fundraising, and then that's kind of done, or we say no, it's not fundraising, and they have to reimburse it. What is the outcome?
What we originally said was that lunches, we felt that lunches with constituents was within,
Course of business.
Yeah,
related to the ordinary course of holding office and not conducting a campaign. They're saying they've re-looked at it and realized it really falls under fundraising. So I guess, Ashley, do we have anything that we could in our code back up and say, well, you did it, you said constituent the first time, you have to stick with that, or can they change their mind or reassess it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Ashley, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. This is part, I mean, our code is vague on this. So it's, as you, I think, said a couple minutes ago, it's kind of a board call on whether you believe that they're looking at it and reframing of it is accurate and acceptable, because there's not much in our code on it one way or the other.
I would suggest that we let it go this time as they restructured it. We've kind of put them on notice that, this raises some red flags. No one else, it was a lot of them and no one else has done it. But, I could see us accepting it this time. And we'll see what comes next. But I don't know if I've ever seen this before and and we've all been in elections and treasurers and whatnot. And this is getting very creative, but I guess if you go to lunch with someone, they're going to probably be more likely to get to know you better and give you money. So,
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense. What they're saying isn't a lie.
Yeah, we can't say that they're lying. How? Because this as both Ashley and Eileen, we were talking about this. They took what we said and they went back and they analyzed it as they mentioned, and they came up with this result. So for us to then go back and say, well, no, it's not fundraising. That's really diving too much into, I think, the nitty gritty of how the inner workings of her campaign or her office holding is.
Yeah.
That's not really getting. It's not where we should be
Appropriate.
looking. So yeah, I don't think that's where we should. So I agree. I think that if that's all right, we just move on, accepting that this is fundraising, and she just makes sure to give us the update to show that disbursement by the next report deadline. And then, prayerfully that she's telling the truth, like, prayerfully their campaigns being honest about it. We really can't know completely, except for our assumption or our thoughts based off facts or information. Okay. So is there a motion then to do that? Because in that case, then we would just be, so the treasurer's signature, he's just going to do that by the next report. You have Eileen, Eileen, you mentioned with Tierney, we said that we're going to do the next report for the flowers, and we're going to do.
Let's do one at a time.
Okay,
are you okay, Eileen, with
yeah, I just want to make sure we do this one at a time. So
okay, let's do it. Yeah.
So for the Eleanor Tierney campaign report, I motion that we accept the explanation given by the campaign in regards to the lunches and their conversion to a fundraising code. That's one motion.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye. And then the second motion is that we we acknowledge the disbursement has been taken out for the flowers for the St. John's College president, and the reimbursement can be submitted with the upcoming July 2024 campaign fund report.
Second.
All in favor there?
Aye.
Aye.
So really with the question, just to be clear on this, the flowers were bought for the president and
right.
Yes.
And they shouldn't have been bought for the president.
Well, out of campaign money.
Right. Okay. So I just wanted to, just to clarify.
This board said earlier, we felt that
that
was consistent with aldermanic and not a campaign expense. Okay. So now there's so again, I'm looking at this analysis. So, because I want to make sure we can get this out. So on the analysis that we have currently, it says Brooks for Annapolis, and it says compliant except for treasurer's signature. So just want to make sure everybody knows that the treasurer's signature has been added and it's compliant.
Okay. Yep. That's what you had mentioned for today. Yeah. So that's
the Friends of Gavin Buckley. The changes from this report show that that's compliant also. So no further action is needed on, well, I take that back. 3 of these do not require any further action. And the only further action that needs to be done is the Tierney campaign reimbursing the flower expense in the next campaign fund report period. So with those changes to what I gave you earlier, the motion would be to accept that the campaign fund reports. Let me back it up. The motion is that amended reports that have been submitted are now compliant.
Yes, that's the motion. Okay. And that we would send this and we approve this analysis, correct?
The motion is that amended campaign fund reports based on this analysis are compliant.
Okay. The second for that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? I know
Aye.
We're gonna move forward on it. Okay. That's just so
it's the gift that keeps on giving.
One day. So we have the last part of our agenda, the annual report to the city council draft. Thank you all thank you, Regina. I know she was very supportive and making sure we were able to get this together and, going through our minutes and make sure everything was as it should be. Hopefully you all loved or appreciated this too. And if
I
not,
make a motion that we accept the annual report as written.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Regina.
Yes, thank you, Regina.
All right, there's a motion to accept the annual report.
And she seconded it. She seconded, so all of Debbie seconded, so all in favor, please.
Okay, and I make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, okay, second for that.
Yeah, I'm leaving at 6 a.m. for Montana, so I've got to go back.
Blessings. Good night. Be safe. Safe travels.
All right,
Did
thank
we do
you.
vote? I
Yes,
second.
that was an, yeah, that